So thank you everyone for being here today. I really appreciate it. And so do my colleagues Nolita and Rod, who are co-facilitating with me today. And I wanted to start off today's session, our first session since the festival, just grounding everyone in the process of the circle, what's happened, how we came to where we are now, and where we're going, and what were our key moments in this development of the circle. So I'll just let you follow this short speech that I'm going to give you about the origins of the circle, where it's come from, where it's going, and then we will hear from Fiston Muganda, who's going to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his story. And then we will be doing some peer circles within the group, talking about some key questions that I'll raise in a bit. And then we will have a plenary discussion where we all debrief from those peer circles and hear your insights and your ideas. And then we will wrap up and build the next session's agenda with you co-constructing with us. So for those who don't know already, the Club of Rome and LearningPlanet came together in 2021 to form what has now become the Ubuntu Learning Circle. And since our inception in October 2021, we've continued refining and shaping the circle through ongoing discussions with our members, both in our regular sessions like this and one-on-one. So each small shift in the circle's aims has been in collaboration with our members, and it's also allowed us to sharpen our focus and better serve our communities. And each of these shifts has responded to our core guiding question of how can we ensure that this circle adds value where it's most needed. And then just to back up a little bit, in September last year, the Africa Kili Declaration, published by the Club of Rome, which commits to upholding African solutions to African problems and prioritizing indigenous wisdom and knowledge systems, was created. And from October, a survey of our members and one-on-one meetings raised a unanimous call to co-construct the circle as a space dedicated to amplifying the voices of African youth across the continent. So this explains our focus on Africa and African youth more specifically. And during our festival session just 2 months ago, the call to move from thinking to doing, and doing boldly at that, from Dr. Mpele and resounding with others, has resonated with all of us, including the co-leads and all of the members of the Ubuntu Learning Circle. And in light of this, we've committed to actions as a circle that will improve education access and advocate for Ubuntu-centered ways of learning. So our focus is now African youth liberating the future, liberating learning narratives across Africa. And what does that mean? So our aim is twofold. Firstly, we would like to improve education access for African youth on a practical level. So this includes breaking the digital divide, which currently prevents a lot of African youth across the continent from enjoying their right to education. And secondly, we want to advocate for and empower Ubuntu-centered ways of learning. So these are ways of learning that emphasize our interconnectedness. And this will pave the way for old and new narratives about learning and what should be learned to be freely accessible. And this involves also breaking down colonial and outdated conceptions of what education and what teaching is, and it empowers Indigenous and intergenerational knowledge sharing. And as many of us know, or some of us might not know, the word Ubuntu in isiXhosa loosely translates to I am because we are. So it reflects our core belief that we are interconnected and intertwined with each other across different ages, areas, and disciplines. So our circle creates this cross-generational community of change makers across Africa who are reinventing our individual and collective futures. And this is fueled by this ethos of Ubuntu at our core. And just to emphasize this core narrative about liberating learning, this is at the heart of our work, because as we free up access to education across the African continent and discard outdated frameworks on what and how to learn from an African context, we are liberating learning. And our immediate focus in the next 3 months or so is focusing on Indigenous knowledge sharing, new models of learning, and reshaping mental frameworks that limit African-driven education. And we'd also like to showcase revolutionary ways of learning, like the WhatsApp-based innovation Fundamate, which is a study buddy on WhatsApp for free, which gives you past exam papers and speaks to you in 11, or no, I think 13 different languages. And this is invaluable as a tool to break the digital divide and allow people to access education. And it's one of many similar initiatives and tools that we can learn to facilitate these actions. And just for those who are new here, we have a few new members. Our circle provides an opportunity for members to learn from and showcase the innovative and inspiring learning systems that challenge outdated frameworks on education in Africa, as I mentioned. And we would like to continue doing this through our regular monthly meetings and perhaps some more meetings that are in the pipeline, which will provide opportunities for ongoing work showcases and intergenerational learning and knowledge sharing through our peer circles, which you will experience today, if you haven't already. And our immediate goal in the next 3 months is for our network of over 200 members to function autonomously and to create connections and an online forum where they can keep feeding into each other's work and building up each other's initiatives. And our ultimate goal is to use this year to develop our concept of liberating learning narratives and use it to discern and act critical impact areas that we've chosen by the next year, with an African implementing co-lead and funder. So thank you for listening to me. We're excited to continue working with you towards a better future for African youth through our Circle's mission. And I really appreciate you all being here and staying for this session. And we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas on how we can achieve all of these actions together. So now I will pass the mic on to Fiston Muganda, and you can introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your story and how you are liberating learning narratives in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I think rather than the whole Africa, I will actually center around Uganda, where I'm currently based, and Congo, where I'm originally from. But before I go on, how much time have I got, please? I like speaking too much.
You have 5 to 8 minutes.
5. Oh, that'll be enough. I'm Fiston Muganda. Sounds a little bit like Ugandan, but I'm from Congo, the DRC originally, but I've been in Uganda for 10 years now. Well, 2 years being lost in Uganda and 8 years trying to find a voice. Yeah. Before I go on introducing what I do, I would just love to acknowledge the words that Dr. Ramphele has on the Ubuntu Learning Circle page that talks about the boldness, and he says, failure to be bold in our dreams and imagination has kept Africa where it is today. And if we get bold, I think that's one way to liberating, learning, or transforming the African continent. My journey, my experience is less of a personal journey and more of me being lost into this ecosystem of people's lives and all that frames as the difficulties, the issues that we're trying to grapple around. Specifically, what I did find a lot very, very interesting is the fact that I left country, like my country of origin, to be in Uganda as a refugee, and then it turned out to trying to shift from being a refugee to an activist, to somebody that wants to do and help things, but also somebody that wants to learn from people. So it's my learning isn't really individual, and neither it is like a personal motivation. I think it's a privilege that I got to be at a point where I felt like well, that I am because you are didn't simply mean me being alive here, because somebody else is there, but rather, me trying to find a call and trying to listen to what does the nature tell me, what does this tree around me tell me, what does this animal passing by telling me, what's do their hearts and pains mean to me. So that was the very first step, and then the other part of it is how do I transcend the hardships. Well, I'm a refugee, of course, but how do I use this as a motivation to fellow refugees and people who are like me, in a way that inspires others, maybe those who are not in my context, but gives a learning experience to those interested to learn. So liberating learning, to me, especially using the Ubuntu learning philosophy, it's about cultivating a sense of community and the interconnectedness in education. And that said, I don't believe in, well, I'm sorry to use the term, I don't believe in education from the formal schooling, the formal style. I believe in education as an inclusive, learning, learning way of doing things. The reason is, when I started activism, I started a group that came to me simply because I had this one day of, a heart-to-heart talk, sharing my story, and people just got connected to that story and felt like they could tell their own stories as well. So the only way was opening up and holding a space for these stories. So it started with the one person to 50 to 150 people coming together on a weekly basis to simply tell the stories, and having this, imagining the togetherness as a way of healing, telling stories as a way of healing. So it started from that way to this, to this platform. I would call it a platform. It's both offline and online, a platform of people saying, well, I don't have to have any expertise to be part of the learning. I don't have to have any expertise to have, to call myself, to have the boldness to say, oh, I'm going to change Africa because I've got this so much expertise. Maybe the real core, the foundation of the transformation is, the step. How bold am I to stand, and just give attention, listen, and then share that which I hold at heart with others. So we believe that education is not just about individual achievement, but also, creating a supportive and collaborative environment where everyone can thrive. And that's what has been happening to me, and it's really, really happening to me. The I am because you are, to me, simply means we believe that no matter how you are, no matter who you are, despite what you're going through, you've got something valuable, something really beneficial to others. And to me, this is how I get bold when I believe, when I have this sense of belonging to a group, belonging to the earth, and I'll be bold enough to give back that which I have, despite its size, despite its little impact on people's life. So what we do with this is, apart from the ongoing clubs of people in the camp, sharing stories, we have a community platform that's online that centers around nurturing relationships. Why do we believe this is one key essential of liberating learning? That's because that's one part of what Ubuntu concept is. I am because you are. Look, I certainly believe from this call here, from this call, there will be concepts, there'll be terms that I will live out, like I will go with, and I'll be pondering about and be inspired and do the journaling and then share that with people. And they will go on sharing with other people. This one way of learning, the one-to-one learning, but also the learning into a collective context. And I find that very, very essential. I don't do this alone. I don't liberate learning. We liberate the learning. Because if I did then no, I don't think the I, to me, makes a lot of sense. I rather think the we, because it's so incomplete. When I do the I comes forward, it gets more and more impactful when there's we that precedes the I. And that's, in that said, is like, even though I hold this so much expertise, this so much experience, it just doesn't make sense if I don't get to share that with others, if I don't pass on to this knowledge to other people. And what I really find so important and really, really fundamental is the sense of always thinking like a community, even though you're one person, taking community at the forefront of whatever we want to do. It's not bad that we are called to be bold, we are called to be courageous, to believe in ourselves. But I think it, like, having that belief in yourself and believing in yourself as the whole community, empowers you even more to go a step further, beyond what you're trying to do. So what you do, your action do not center around a personal achievement, but rather a community, on a community level. And speaking of the Ubuntu concept, to me, is, one day I was asked, like, what does Ubuntu means? And I felt so, what should I use this term for? I felt bad because people misinterpreted the Ubuntu meaning. Let me tell you this, like, not challenging. Let me invite you to think about this. So many people think Ubuntu is only an African concept. And this is something I take further in thinking, like, let's translate this and how this regarded. What do you call Ubuntu in France? What do you call Ubuntu in America? It's not that we don't have this. We do have this. It's only that we've got so much privilege as Africans to do our things, sourcing from the Ubuntu spirit. So cultivating the Ubuntuism in our own, I think that's really, really, the foundation of liberating learning. Realize it doesn't happen if we don't come together. And I believe, Ubuntu centers from that forefront of bringing people as a community and not in a personal, context. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Fiston. I think those are some very wise observations and words to share with us, and your experience as well, I think, speaks volumes about that. And I think all of us are coming at this from a completely unique context, and some of us share certain elements of our context, but I think, as you mentioned, it's more about creating a community that exists in relation to each other. It's not so much about an individual thing, it's a collective thing. And yeah, there's just so many great things that you mentioned there. I would like to maybe ask you one follow-up question, and then we can open it up to more people to ask follow-up questions or to drive the discussion forward. Is, what do you think you could get from this Ubuntu Learning Circle? Having explained how you got to where you are now and how you view liberating learning narratives, what do you think you could stand to gain from being part of this community?
Please say that again. I think I'm missing. Your voice is phrasing a little bit.
Oh, so I was just asking whether whether you could explain a little bit what you think you could gain and learn from, or what you need to learn from this circle and from the community that we have here.
Oh, all right. That's really an interesting question. From a personal thinking and expectations, the first thing I see as a wealthy learning, or a wealthy gain, is not only seeing faces, listening to voices, listening to people's personal experiences, like towards their actions, towards the community. That's one way I get inspired to keep doing things. I'm a refugee. Like, I could simply be disrupted by the fact that, oh, I want to find safety, I want to be safe, I want to have a life, but being among these multiple identities, it's one way to say, oh yeah, it's actually about keeping layers, keeping layers on and on, and always seeking that voice that drives us to create something that helps others, and being part of this ecosystem, part of this community. What else should I need? It's a community, right? So this could be a community of communities, and I think that's really, really important.
Great, thank you, Fiston. At this point, I'm going to ask if anyone else has any questions or points they would like to raise before we move on to the next thing. Go ahead, you can just speak.
Yeah.
Dorothée. Yeah.
Thank you, Fiston. It's as Anne put in the chat, it's very powerful and inspiring, your story. My name is Dorothée. I work for MasterPeace. It's an international youth movement, and we are represented in 20 countries on the African continent. Also in my hometown, city of The Hague in the Netherlands, we run projects with youngsters. And what I feel after Corona lockdown, and also I think because of social media use, many youngsters are very focused on themselves, very individualistic. So when I came in the group of youngsters the first time, for me it is so it's like key that you are, as an individual, you can only exist because we are together. But to them, they are so focused on themselves. It was really, we needed to take many steps to get them feel like you're part of a community. What is your experience, or what's your perspective, Fiston, on this? That youth tend to be very individualistic these days.
Allow me to ask you to ask me that way again. Do you mean me compared to other young people you've met?
Well, compared to myself, my own values are so much aligned with what you are saying, that you as an individual person, you can only exist because we are in a group, and I'm very much community minded. But it was like, for me, a sort of surprise, I think, after Corona lockdown. Youngsters were so individualistic. So, no, it's me, it's my life. I can take care of myself. I don't care about the other. That was a surprise to me. So how do you see this?
Well, I think I see that with two perspectives. One way was, well, the Corona has taught us, like, being alone and all this is on you, but the Corona also taught us the essence of those who are close to us. We got to be on the calls no matter what. This teacher, this boss had to shift, from offline meetings to online meetings. This good friend just reached out to you and said, hey, I would just love to know how you're doing. With the use of technology, I saw relationships being created. I personally was introduced to communities that I now call being part of a family. I was separated from my family 10 years ago, but during this COVID, I got to meet Nora Batson, and I learned so much from her and from all the warm data, the Presensing Institute communities. Like I get to learn how life looks like out there. And that draws me to my core belief and saying, oh, we are all one. It's not this is not only mine, this is not only my life, it's actually affecting somebody else. We saw mothers being depressed of the fact that kids kids are locked down somewhere. We saw people losing their minds because they couldn't reach their families. So I don't think that was personal. It wasn't personal. I still felt that sense of being together.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to both of you for that interesting exchange. John Gilmour, go ahead.
Yeah, Fiston, I particularly love that last response. I think you answered the question, what do circles of healing bring? And what do we bring to the circles? That's as important a question as to what the circles can do. I think what circles can do is not an entry point. It's a point down the line. If you know what the circle's going to do, then why have the circle? Why not just have a project team? The beauty of a circle is that it connects people with each other in a way that we all look at each other, and that there's no power dynamic in that. So there can be older people in the circle, younger people in the circle, and every voice matters, and every life matters, and every story matters. So I think there is a tension sometimes between the European view of circles of healing and the African view of circles of healing. And what I hear from Fiston is that he's saying it's a place where I claim my voice. He even said I'm still, I needed to find a place to find my voice. And not just the voice of advocacy, the voice of authenticity, the who am I voice. And for me, as an older white South African working with youth, I'm still in circles because I'm still working out what the next level of graduation there is for me in finding my voice. Now, if a circle becomes a project team, then we lose the space to discover. We lose the place to just hear each other and be challenged. And the theme of my life is based on the Paulo Freire words of unlearning. A circle is a place to surrender. It's a place to let go your anxieties and to declare your vulnerability and to be vulnerable. So I really just want to, I stayed away a couple of times because I got stuck in my frustration with the fact that the circle is a place that's moving to action. And that may sound counterintuitive, but I think Fiston can do action. I think there's plenty of action that he's already doing, and that most of us are in action. What we're not so good at is interconnecting. And the question about youth, becoming cut off and becoming isolated is exactly why circles are needed. So all we have to work out is what is the invitation to join the social movement that is inspired by Africa, but is for the world. So we should not be too African focused in it. We should be claiming the African solution for the global challenge. And we are bringing into that conversation, we have lost each other. We have lost each other. And we have got cut off from each other. And the rugged individualism has devalued the basic human reality that we are interconnected and interdependent, and that love needs to be reintroduced into every curriculum that there is. And I agree with you, Fiston. The formalized education is a product of intellectualized perception of a reality which we all live in with deep feelings. And it's time to challenge that and make sure that there is this connection between the head, the heart, and the hand. And a circle is a place where it's an invitation to discover what you already know in some ways, and to recommit to to being part of the social movement ultimately, that will be the necessary change. I know there's a sort of flood of ideas in there, but I've been kind of storing these reality checks for me on, if a circle becomes a project team, then we lose the power of the circle. Thanks for the opportunity.
Julie, you had something to say? Do you want to contribute to that?
Mute myself. I would like to mainly reflect back to Fiston, because I think you asked what can Fiston get from us, so to speak, and I think that one of the elements that are, when I hear your story, I hear the element, the importance of storytelling, of having time to tell that story. But you also give us a story which we can, I'm sorry for being so functionalistic, but you're also giving us a story that we can carry on. And that's basically what you can also get for us, that we multiply your story. And I find that important. So I'm wondering, you know, am I going to, when I tell this story, do I then tell, I heard this guy in this Ubuntu circle who told me about one person came, and then the next person came, and within weeks we were that and that. And somehow, and I think this is, again, I'm maybe being a bit too precise, but I think this is like a method, what all the stuff that is in that method. And I think that is something which is the basis of learning. I totally agree. It's the basis of learning. We need to have this community in order to be able to learn well, because we also want to learn how to do things and be able to tell each other how we do stuff, so that we get that we can implement the things that we the methods that we that make us change and make us work better. So I'm just wondering, is it possible somehow to make your story a bit more precise, or is it somewhere where I can find it, so that I can also use it and also give you the credit at the same time? You know, it's basically what's this whole thing about community and about sharing this information, but also remembering to credit those who work with it. So how do I functionalize your story, and how do we get something concrete out of it? And that's, I think that's so important when we are here, that we sort of have little tools that we can bring along afterwards.
Am I allowed to respond, Catherine?
Yes, go for it.
All right. Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much. And Mr. John, I just put the words in the chat to say we are all incomplete stories, and being incomplete stories, we don't need to professionalize our stories. I think for a story to be interesting and worth learning from, especially with the circle view, it needs to be raw and, you know, authentic, being true and not being adaptable. And somewhere within the story, there are territories that speak to people, to the listeners, differently, in different ways. I don't think my way of telling story should necessarily be exactly as Katherine, you know, tells about her story, but somewhere in between, if Lolita spoke about anything, there is a territory that will collide with mine. There's a territory that will urge me to think about, you know, the story in my own context, and that, I think that's one way that will make it worth, you know, looking at it with a more concrete, you know, perspective. Also, like John said, we don't have to use the circle and turn it into a project team, because we're losing the track. One way of having, you know, I look at the circle as a place where someone, like as a place for discovery and growth. And without lying to you, it's not evident that we get to discover, you know, and grow if, you know, if we make things professional. I think to be able to discover and grow as people, you know, as this earth species, we need to make things authentic and very, very low down to earth. That's one way to make things concrete and learn in a more concrete way. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Thank you, Fiston, for doing that, because I think while we, as John Gilmour mentioned earlier, while we don't want to become too operational in the sense that everything becomes a project and we have a team of project managers managing everything, we also need some kinds of, and thank you, Julie, for bringing that precision element. We do need this precision, and we do need to have some concrete action that we can strive towards, because otherwise I think we do run the risk of staying purely in an ideational phase where everything becomes abstract. And then I think there's a trade-off between how abstract the contents of the circle is and how tangible the results or the outputs of it can be, or what kinds of tangible outcomes can be generated from this collection of amazing people. So I think that's an interesting tension to hold. Go ahead, Nadia.
Hi, hello everyone, and thank you for this beautiful circle. I wonder, and it's really just a question, if this urge for us to take action is an inherited thing from the mechanistic industrialized system that has made us feel that the only way we can actually achieve or make progress is by having outcomes and outputs. And I wonder if we are resisting that thing which we so much need to evolve as a civilization, which is a way we haven't been yet in relationship to self and to others and with each other. It is a much more challenging way to be and to explore. It's the unknown. This is a question, but it's also just what I'm in resonance to what has been shared so far, and an invitation to explore. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. I'm going to hand over to Anne and then Nolita.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna have to stop my video because I always have that with Zoom. Sorry. Thank you so much for this beautiful discussion, and Fiston, I really think you made a beautiful analysis, and I agree also with John that we have to be careful that, and with Nadia, that we have to be careful not to instrumentalize you know, this group learning kind of, but I think we should also not make it like a false opposition. And I usually refer to process ecology, which studies sustainable systems, and it is shown, you know, through many researches that the most sustainable systems keep this balance between, on the one hand, openness, co-creation, creativity, you know, emerging niches, a place where new stories can emerge, and on the other hand, it's called ascendancy or efficiency, where we sort of streamline the stories into something that can, you know, be recognized as the new normal, or something, you know, is somewhat institutionalized. So I think if we know that even in nature and you know, social systems and human systems and technical systems, keeping that balance is what keeps your system, you know, keeps it sustainable. And very interestingly, and this is, I think, where Ubuntu is really needed, the most sustainable systems have like a balance of 60% divergent thinking and emergent creative ideas, and only 40% efficiency, ascendancy, streamlining, you know. And because indeed the Western culture is so into streamlining, we have now a monoculture, and there is no more space for this, you know, this open, creative, new stories emerging space. So that's why I think that's the unique role or value of the Ubuntu learning, is that we institutionalize this novel space, and that it might be good to scale its visibility and to sort of like make it recognized and visible and scaling, you know, being copied elsewhere without it becoming the new tool or method or output generative thing. It's keeping that balance. I think we can learn from that. So I think, you know, fostering the 60% creativity is what Ubuntu learning does, but for it to really have impact, as I also think, you know, not just stay in the ideation phase, we should look into ways to scale it and to bring it into the mainstream, but only at a limited, you know, less than half of our energy should go there. That's it.
Thank you, Anne. That's really a really valuable perspective, and I really resonated with a lot of what you were saying. And I think it is a false dichotomy of action and ideas, as you rightly put it. And yeah, I think that is a nice way to segue into next segment with a brief interlude from Nolita. Did you still want to say something?
Thought I might risk being a little bit repetitive, but in my probably rudimentary understanding of learning, there's some of the learning that's done learning in a system that's done for the maintenance, which is the learning you impart across generations to give knowledge of what has been previously understood. And then there's the learning that is innovative, which often comes from dealing with a new situation, so having to create a new response to a new situation. So with part of what I understood of Anne's point was, it's not an either or, it is both have to happen to create something new. And the innovative learning, or the learning that is in response to a new situation, often happens when you have moved positions, when you've tried something, or at least in this situation, when you've tried something and there's a response. And then you then learn to figure out what to do with that response to that new learning. So an example is, Fiston, you had mentioned storytelling, being like, you know, telling your story was something that you started doing. And then when other people coming and just telling their stories, I would assume that you had to then have a new understanding of the what is happening and the community that is forming by the action that has happened by telling your stories. Because without that happening, then it wouldn't have been clear that, oh, there is this learning that has happened. There is this community that has formed. And then the work of being in a community in and of itself also presents a different array of like new things to understand about Ubuntu, because then you start seeing, oh, I am, because of other people, their stories have now contributed to my new understanding, my new perspective of the world and the things that I did not even know I needed to know beforehand. So yeah, I'm not going to speak to it because I would say I'm repeating what has been mentioned about the fact that it's not an either or. Communities often are, whether intentionally or unintentionally, headed towards something, and when that's something, when in that process of heading to something, learning is happening at the same time.
Great, thank you, Nolita. It's great to have a recap before we jump into the next part of this call, which is to try and get more people to engage on a smaller level through our peer circles, which is basically a mini version of the discussion that we're having now within 3 breakout rooms. So we'll put you with fellow Ubuntu Learning Circle members, and each room will be dealing with one question. So we've and you're welcome to answer the question as you like in your group, or if you feel like you have a better question, or if you want to use it as a jumping off point and progress the discussion elsewhere, you're also welcome to do that. And we'll have 3 rooms, each with their own question to address. So number 1, group 1, will be what is liberating learning narratives? And this could be what it means to you, or how you see this being relevant in the context of this discussion. Then the second room will be why should we liberate learning narratives? Or should we liberate learning narratives? That's something to debate amongst yourselves. And then number 3 will be what are the barriers to liberating learning narratives? And that is open for interpretation as you like. And Rod, do you have something to add?
Yeah, before we break out into the breakout rooms, John Malamba wanted to speak. He has been raising his hand for a while now. So if you would just please invite him.
Sure. John Malamba seems a little busy at the moment. Hello.
Okay. Thank you, Katherine. Thank you so much. And actually, I'm very much happy, glad to be part of this the learning Franco. And my major interest is to learn more about the Ubuntu learning circle, and to majorly identify the area of programs. Then we find a way of how we can have a joint implementation. What do we need to do? Then we seek people to work with collaboratively. Others are doing it on the other end. Others are doing implementing the same program in Africa, in Kenya, like now in Kenya. Then we do implementation and working in a collaborative way.
Thank you everyone for really interesting discussion. I think that we all learned a lot during this short time. I'm going to just give another 10 minutes or so to a plenary debrief or any points that you would like to bring up here. And let's start with group 1, which is what are learning narratives? What are liberating learning narratives? What's that about? Was that Nolita's group or Rod's group? Nolita, go ahead.
Good day, everyone on the bigger group. I was just finishing up responding to Anne. Her comment was that how do we change the fact that when they've got students that coming from the Europe side coming to the south, coming here to learn about what's going on here, and what happens is that in fact they come here and instead of them learning, they get into a space of them wanting to teach us and vice versa from the south, students thinking that they can only learn from the Western world. And I was saying that it actually takes work. You have to actually look into yourself, into your heart, and understanding that as a person, who am I? And I have a lot to share with the world. I have a lot to give because we are living in maybe different areas. So when I see someone from the Western side, it's not about that person coming here to teach me about my country. I'm actually the one who's supposed to be teaching that person or sharing the stories of what's going on in our continent, sharing the story myself with my own voice and not the other way around. So I was just finishing up that answering that question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bongisa. That's a very valuable point about, we were mentioning in my group as well about this top-down colonial type of education where the teacher has all the knowledge and the learner knows nothing, and it's about imparting that, and we need to break away from this, and that's part of what liberating learning narratives is about. Perhaps who would like to share from our group? John, Julie, Fiston. How about Fiston? Would you like to share? Or am I putting you on the spot?
Yeah.
Would you like to summarize?
Thank you, Catherine. Actually, what so spoke to me within the summary of what we talked about is the fact that like is the urge of the education and the learning that's based on a community need rather than learners receiving, you know, it teaches knowledge. But maybe allow me also to quote this. I'm looking at the two ways of teaching from what somebody knows to what they don't know, and teaching from what somebody doesn't know what they know. I think as we talk about learning, this is one key and essential part of the learning, the education system we should look at as we design a new curricula, we design new ways of learning, especially with the African context. It's not that we don't know, it's just that we know and would love to add more. And to me, it feels like being dictated what to learn or receiving this simple knowledge without us exploring, without us sharing, hinders, the whole learning. And that has caused, lots of negative outcomes over the years, over the decades. And if we take, like Nadia said, if we take this to be maybe the action point, then that would bring about the changes that we would love to see coming out.
Thank you very much, Fiston. And yeah, great summary. Nolita and Raj, would you like to nominate someone from your group to summarize, or would you like to summarize what you discussed about answering the final question, which was, what are the barriers to liberating learning narratives?
I can summarize, but before that, our room ended while Lucia was sharing her perspective. So if you want to share that, Lucia, please go ahead.
So I was just finishing up our conversation about what the space should be for, in terms of Nolita shared like an example of somebody saying like, how can this space be more relevant to me, like, and the problems that I'm working on directly. And we were speaking about that, and I think that to a degree that it's creating a space and then meeting people where they are, but also balancing that with making the space purposeful, and saying that this is a space for learning and sharing ideas. And I think inspiration and creativity can come from so many different places, and that this can also be a space for that too. And yeah, I think that if you value that, we were talking about values a lot, that if you value that that energy and that space, then you will be met with the same in the space. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Lucia. That's really great. Do you want to continue, Nolita? Is there anything else to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna do the brief one-line summary. Just getting to the sentence is that, because the room was intended to speak on the barriers of liberating learning narratives, but I took a detour a little bit by asking a different question. But on the topic of the barriers, it was that sometimes we undervalue the work it takes to build trust between people and communities. And the liberating potential comes in that trust building, because that's when you get to explore. And as Mark reflected an example Fiston made about, you then get to reflect back, you get to refresh on the stories from other people. So one of the barriers is in how we value our indigenous practices of sitting down and listening and hearing and resonating and getting a refreshing perspective on what is going on with learning, and also having the opportunity or the place to link or change, perceive what you're doing on a day-to-day basis as part of a bigger narrative, of a bigger story. That if that is undervalued, the action of linking it back to a bigger community is undervalued, then the larger narrative itself, then we don't get the opportunity to build the trust to create something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's quite valuable input as well. And I wanted to thank everyone for their insights and for your time in talking through these issues with us and raising different points, because I think this is really imperative for us to keep reflecting on our values ourselves and keep reflecting on whether we are actually taking forward what we intended to take forward and whether we are doing what we intended. And yeah, I think an impact doesn't always match intention, and we need to be conscious of that. So thank you very much. I think for the last 5 to 6 minutes, and if anyone has anything final to add, you can add that. Otherwise, we would like to co-construct the agenda of the next session with you. So if there's any of the points from today that you would like to raise again, or any other points, please go ahead and raise them now. Go ahead, and then Julie.
Thank you. Just a quick, very practical question. I think this is so important, such an important learning space. And I have currently 3 students or young people who are junior enterprises, and they're doing all sorts of wonderful things in Kenya, you know, with their startup companies. They're gonna, whatever, share tractors or install. And I'm like, I would like them to make sure, you know, they go with the best intentions, but can they also be inspired by first creating this Ubuntu learning space before they come with their solutions? And I was just wondering how we can make this kind of space also accessible to them, because they really have the best intentions, but they just have never been well educated through you know, this kind of learning spaces. So I don't know if this circle, I mean, in terms of having impact or actions, it could be something that we could do.
Thank you, and I definitely think we could invite them to join the discussion, and I think we would benefit a lot from hearing other perspectives. I think that's something that was raised right at the beginning when Fiston was telling his story, is that we are being enriched as much as the exchange is equally enriching on both sides. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thank you, and feel free to pass on the invitation to anyone. Julie, go ahead.
I have one question. It's a little bit about the format, because there's so much always happening in the chat, and the chat disappears afterwards. And I was wondering whether there is whether there could be any platform. I will not suggest Google, but whether there could be any whether we could make a space where, on the one hand, we copy the chat so that people also look to make their links in the chat so that we can find it again, and yeah, and maybe add stuff that we find, so that there is like more of a little bit of a sort of a research narrative, or just a sharing of links, which could sort of flow beneath the 1.5 hours of intense attention.
Yes, 100%. We are actually planning to incorporate that in our new platform that we're designing at LearningPlanet for the circle. And that's going to, if you haven't seen our webpage, it's going to be where our new webpage lives. But for now, we are using Google, sorry to say, but we have a link to an open document that Rod just shared in the chat, and everyone should be able to add their thoughts there, and it's relatively easy to navigate. So feel free to add your notes, any comments. Yeah, and we have also been recording this session, and the recording will be put online afterwards. And this recording goes with some AI generated transcripts for the session, so you'll be able to access this. Go ahead, John Malamba.
Thank you. Thank you, Katherine. I've got a question because I found that a very, very interesting and interactive session, and I suggest that we don't just hold the whole discussion without implementation. We need to identify area, a particular program, then we find a way of collaboration and working together and rolling out this program jointly, and we learn the way other people are doing it, the way other people on the other end are doing it, and then we find that we are implementing this program jointly in different places, in different countries, and we are doing it together in a digital way. Because I've been trying to establish within the library, and the section of the ICT hub group, which I think that I've been talking to my colleagues and my friends that what we need to do is to furnish the ICT lab with computers and high-speed internet connectivity, so that we can have a better program that we are rolling out, learning from what others are doing. Others learn also on our side what we are doing on this end within the State Library in Kenya. Then we find that this will become a very, very interesting program. And then we say that, okay,
I think we've lost John Malamba. Yeah. John Gilmour, you had a response?
Yeah, my response is not just to John, but to the question of, what can we bring here and what would not be appropriate to bring here. I think, just as we say, a good leader, the mark of a good leader is the number of leaders that good leader produces, rather than what he does in his own lifetime. I think the mark of a good Ubuntu circle is the number of circles it generates. So I caution against the central control of it being cited in a particular place. We should be making circles out of this circle. And so I can see immediately I'm reaching out to Fiston and to Bongisa, with whom I work, and she's a product and a partner in the work we do, to say we should be introducing Fiston and Bongisa back into a space of a whole lot of young people. And then, Anne, we should be saying to you, those people who are coming here, don't let them sit where we are talking at a level of, which is really a cross-generational level, and it's an important one, but it is quite exclusive for people who really just want to get into the nitty-gritty of meeting people and letting go of their feelings. So I'd be very happy, Anne, to say to you, if you would like your people to meet a group of people, let's create a circle just for that purpose. And let's see what comes out of that. And Bongisa could be a starting point from my point of view to hold some of that responsibility, and we ask Fiston into it and whoever else we know. Good. That's what my suggestion was.
Thank you, John. And yeah, I 100% agree. And we are now at time, so I understand if people need to leave already, but just to finish off that thought, I definitely do think that working groups or peer circles within the circle focused on different elements, and as you mentioned, these different tensions of different goals and different mindsets that people have, and they can bring values through those different ways of thinking. I think it is really valuable to do that. But yes, we can save that for next time. All of this has been noted. So thank you everyone so much for joining. And sorry, Samuel, you wanted to mention something. I think I'll give you the last minute and then we'll close off the call.
Yes, I just quickly wanted to add to what John had said, that potentially, perhaps if it's possible that if there's a database that has the contact lists and designations of all members of the circle, perhaps it'd be useful to have, so that in future, maybe if there's a project or program that would like to engage members on, perhaps it becomes easier to reach out accordingly as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Samuel.